Hello, hello. I am, if it's not repetitive, to say I am so excited to get to work with and learn with you all today. We are starting week 6 of the 10-week boot camp. And if you're just joining us for the first time, that is not even remotely a problem. Everything in the whole world is stressful right now, but this, not a problem at all. Well, I hope it's not a problem. So today what we're going to start talking about is some of the sort of design concepts that underpin what we're learning. So let's sort of walk back a bit. What have we learned so far? We started out and we covered some computer science fundamentals. Okay. Most of the stuff y'all might have already known, but it's good to review for folks who weren't familiar. And then what we did is we learned quite a bit of HTML. And that must have been a little bit stressful because I was constantly saying, we'll learn CSS soon, we'll learn CSS soon. And now we're learning some CSS. Stunning. But we're kind of pausing for just a second. And what we're doing right now is we're learning some sort of design concepts to sort of start to batch our thinking with CSS around, if that's okay. I mean, we're going to do it anyway, so I hope it's a good fit for y'all. I'm going to bring up the notes. And if you're following along in real time, what we've been working on is tons and tons of theory. So your solo work over the weekend was, please read a heck ton of stuff. We're going to go ahead and go through our notes and have a really chill time. As a spoiler, you have even more theory reading for later. As always, if you have any questions as we go, just chuck them in here. I did see one question saying, oh, do we have a different background? Nah, I just tipped my computer a little bit so y'all see fewer cats screaming at each other and more whiteboard. So when I need to take a little note to myself, y'all see the kinds of things I'm going to look up later. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so one big thing to remember is we are covering a ton of design concepts all at the same time. I absolutely do not expect you to remember every single one of these. Yeah, we're starting to explore some of these concepts. So when we come back and start building in more and more of these CSS concepts, we're able to think about, hey, how do we feel about the layout of this page? Do I like how the elements are aligned? And we can just go through some of these terms really fast. As always, I find that you all have a much better way of describing these than I do. So, and if you could tell, the notes look really good today because our technical expert, Edda, helped with the notes and helped with. She really did them all. We're going to cover a couple of basic design concepts and then keep going. So here are big bucket terminology. Layout. Layout is how the visual elements, the text, your images, really your HTML elements, It's how they're arranged on the page, or really the screen, and how that conveys a message. If you've got something really serious, really punchy to talk about, you might want to have that be really heavy layout, really stark. If something is very emotional, very poignant, you might want to use, and we'll talk about white space in a second, more white space in your layout to let that more emotional element have a little bit more space to itself. Alignment. Alignment is how elements are placed in relationship to each other. Designers can align elements along imaginary lines, edges, or a central point. Yes, so this is such a good point. Baking says, hey, they worked on some layout concepts when they worked on a school newspaper. And this is really similar. Some of the concepts from web design layout feel really similar and kind of come from a print mindset. You'll hear, sorry, my horrible cat in the background thinking it's dinner time. You'll hear terms like above the fold in web layout saying, hey, this is something that you see on the page before you scroll down, which really comes from before the fold, above the fold on newspaper layout. Composition. Composition is sort of the vibes, the overall vibes of the page. It's how the different elements arranged together flow together. Yeah, the difference between layout and composition is layout is just the arrangement of elements, and composition, I like to think of it as a musical composition. It's how those flow. Balance. Balance is the distribution of visual weight within a composition. Designers can often focus on creating a balanced decision through the arrangement of those elements. Hierarchy. I'm really excited because we've talked about hierarchy a lot, especially in relation to our H1 elements. We've talked about semantic hierarchy, and this is kind of very, very similar. Hierarchy here is arranging the information or the elements or the art on your page in a way that calls your user's attention to the most important first. Sometimes you'll hear hierarchy around information called information architecture. So this is saying, hey, let's think about the size, the color, the contrast, the alignment, the white space, the layout, all of these things to make our composition communicate the hierarchy, communicate the most important things first. Contrast. We've already talked about contrast when we talked about accessibility, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later on in today's notes. And contrast helps create a visual distinction between the elements, which is also really, really important for improving readability and is important for overall accessibility. Mel's very rightly asking, okay, can drawing a line on your web page for where to focus help you design a balanced site? Maybe a zigzag line if you want someone to start here and bounce around. You can. I've often seen sort of timeline style lines as a way to call people's attention to this happened and this happened, especially in linear thought. Um, a up, down, or a zigzag could work, but be really careful. A zigzag would be really, really easy to follow for somebody who had a giant monitor, and it could be pretty challenging for somebody who's working on a smaller monitor or on their phone. Oh, Eulidel, I love this isn't a question, but it's a comment, especially from y'all, because you're so, so smart and patient. Eulidel saying, hey, do you know a trick for sort of approaching how we balance these is saying one balancing method is saying having your small details, your medium details, and your large details kind of cover the same basic areas to say, hey, here are the less important aspects. Let's say about a third of the space for those. Here's our somewhat important, about a third from, and our super important. We might want to do those first. Gosh, I see a question about the free code camp. I see a free question about the free code camp tutorial environment, and I'm going to save that for the end, just in case it's not you. That's just to keep things really, really focused for folks watching this as a video after the fact. Cool. White space. White space is the negative space or the empty area surrounding your elements. If we were talking about printing or a newspaper, that could be the margin. White space isn't always white. If the background of your page is blue, you have blue white space. The main purpose is to improve the readability and the visual hierarchy, really keep things balanced. You're going to hear two terms again and again and again and again, and they're really easy to confuse. User interface, UI, is the way your users will interact with a computer, a web page, or a system. The user interface of the page we're on is, let's come up and look at it. The user interface of this page has a navigation calendar, tells us what subject we're working on right now. It lets us view the video in real time or after the fact as well. It lets you know the key information. It lets you down. So all of these different things you could do are the user interface. Oop, sorry, I'm going to come all the way down. I hate to scroll like this. It makes me a little seasick too. Do. And the user experience is about the feeling that users have when using your website or a product. It's sort of how easy or how difficult and how accessible it is to use the user interface. Yeah. So a user interface is what your user interacts with, where your user hangs out, and what they can do on the site. The user experience is how easy or how hard or how weird it is for your users to use the user interface. User interface, what can your users do? User experience, how much does it suck or delight to use the user interface? Yep. All right. Let's talk about, and the big thing about this. Oh. This is such a good question. And I'm going to look at it now because this is, y'all are going to hate this. This is a philosophical question again. And Mel is saying, hey, you know what? What about, can we think about how web pages all kind of feel alike these days? For example, if you're shopping for something on the web, most modern stores, most modern shops online have kind of the same layout. You'll have a little menu up in the corner, maybe a profile button, you'll have a search. So really, we're seeing a lot of sort of template approaches. And we're seeing that websites in 2026 all often have a really similar feel. And this isn't universally true across cultures. So some regions still have really unique, really distinct web design. But we are kind of seeing that different types of approaches to web design. We go through fads, the same way we go through fads with clothing or interior design, where, okay, everybody's websites or everybody's stores feel a little bit like this now. And one thing we've got to kind of balance is saying, hey, when all of these web experiences, let's say stores was a really good example, all shops online feel really similar. That means that if you're building a shop, your users probably already have a lot of expectations for where they can find the cart and where they can find search. You might not want to experiment with those conventions as much as if you're building a personal portfolio site or an artistic site. So, thinking about where creativity and user expectation around user experience might be trade offs. We have a really good question for learners saying, hey, when we're talking about white space, what is that? Yeah, can I ask you to ask this another way? This is a really good question, I think. So, how do we categorize the types of white space? When we're talking about white space is visual space where we don't have any other elements. These could be the margins, this could be the padding between elements. But can you talk to me in a little bit more detail about what this question is, or just sort of ask it a different way? Sorry about that. It feels like a really exciting question, but sometimes questions in text can be difficult. Okay, just really quickly, we're going to talk about contrast again. You're going to see the same topics come up again and again and again and again. And it's because they're important. Contrast is just the difference between two colors. If y'all were hanging out with me last Tuesday, I was experimenting with some CSS to see what some different CSS would do. And I put in a background color and a text color that had terrible contrast. I think it was blue with a purple text. And it was really difficult to see. Oh, hi, Blink. That was not great contrast. Colors that have higher contrast are more visually distinct, while colors that have lower contrast are more visually similar. For example, black and white, stunning contrast ratio, but light purple and light blue, terrible contrast ratio, which makes it hard to see. Remember when we talked about accessibility, and we're going to keep talking about it, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines tell you what a good balance, a good ratio for accessible colors are. The bare minimum, the least you can get away with, and you never want to do the bare minimum, is a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. But if you want to do a really, really good job, a contrast ratio of 7 to 1. You can use in-browser developer tools, or here is Edda's helpfully suggested web accessibility checker. Oh, look how haunted this is. I've already told you there's a couple of different ways to do colors, and we're going to be learning colors together next week. But check out these very stressful codes, 0000 FF for this dark blue. How stressful, how terrible. It's not. We'll do it together. So if I wanted to use this dark blue and this white, this would have a stunning contrast ratio. We could use this. And here we can see it as an example below. This is pretty good and pretty cool. Learner, I'm going to save this question because I think it's really good, and we're going to explore it later if that's okay, or at the end of the session. So there's going to be, and don't worry, we're going to talk about colors really specifically, I believe next week. I feel like next Monday. And there's 3 basic concepts when we talk about colors that we're going to talk about a lot. The hue, and the hue is, what color is it? It's the red, it's the blue, it's the yellowy. The saturation, it's how loud or how quiet. No, it's good. This is good. Sorry, somebody was saying, no, we'll learn this soon. But I love a question. Everything's okay. Oh, I should have warned you all at the beginning of this session, we're going to be looking at a couple of different concepts in preview. And that can always be a little stressful. So saying, hey, we're going to look at these together in a minute. But just to let you know, these are going to happen. Yeah, absolutely. We've got hue, saturation, and lightness. Baking is absolutely correct, but there's a couple of other ones hidden, and we'll talk about them more. We could also talk about hue, tint, saturation, and luminance, or lightness here. So saturation, how loud or how quiet the amount of color is present, and lightness or opacity, how much white is present in the color. And this is just a quick preview. If none of this stuck in your heart, and if none of this stuck in your head, it's not a problem. It won't hurt us. We're gonna come back. Oh, heck. We're gonna come back to this next week and talk about color in huge detail. So why would we even care about good visual hierarchy in design? So first, we care about it because we care about design, I hope, and we really care about accessibility. Having clear visual hierarchy helps you make sure that you're clearly communicating to your users what's important and where they should be looking first, second, third, and etc. For example, the font sizes for headings. We talked about visual hierarchy in the context of, we talked about hierarchy in the context of semantic HTML. And here, the H1 being the most important, and the H2 and the H3 is not only giving us really good semantic hierarchy, it's also giving us the context of, hey, by default, and we probably want to keep this in some way visually distinct in our design, our H1 is going to be bigger and more noticeable than our H2, helping us not just semantically define this for folks using assistive technologies, but also having the visual design carry quite a bit of this. And here we're seeing some fantastic code written by Edda, where our default styles for our H1 and H2s are being overwritten. I love it. Here we're saying, I have my own idea for what this H1, for what this H2 should look like. But what I'm still doing is saying this H1 should be 32 pixels high. It should be pretty big. But do you know what? My H2 is still important. Sorry, just saving a question for a minute. This H2 is still important, but a little bit less. Visually, I want somebody to see the H1 and then be able to tell that the H2 is sort of the child of that. And the H3, again, a little bit smaller, commands slightly smaller margins as well. We've got more space for the parts of this that carry more information. Yeah. Wow, and our callout class is 2. And actually, I'm going to ask y'all to use either your code editor in Free Code Camp or use something like Code Sandbox or CodePen and have a look at what these look like. So you should be able to see, oh, I forgot to share today's notes, my apologies. You should be able to see these. I'd ask you to go ahead and copy these into a browser, or copy these into an editor and see how these feel. And he's asking, hey, so we've got these strong and strong tags. Isn't that enough? So here we've got a tip, but the class of callout here, use a callout box like this to highlight notes or key takeaways. Here we've got quite a bit going on. So me is like, hey, look, you've already added the strong here, which both adds the semantic meaning that this is important, and by default has some visual styling that this is important. Why are we also using a callout box like this? So the first thing I would say is taking a look at what this, actually, let's do this together. If you can see me looking a bit grumpy, it's because I can hear my terrible, terrible cats in the living room triggering my speaker. I am copying and pasting. They are not smart cats, but they are just smart enough to protest when they think dinner is important. So I am coming over here, and what I've got is the CSS from our sample here, and I'm going to go ahead and use our HTML over here. This is just copied and pasted out of our notes. Gosh, okay. Gosh, listen to me. I sound like a children's presenter. Y'all have ruined me. I love it. So here, we've got that H1. So really, really good. Oh, I see that well enough. We've got this really good, this is the H1. This is probably the most important. We've got a lot of space. Here's our H2, the heading tiers. Still important, less chunky. This callout box to highlight key important notes or takeaways. Actually, this callout box should have the callout box should give us a border and a little bit of shading. Why are you? Oh, y'all. Can you? This is exactly the same as I did last time. Can anybody tell me why I'm not actually seeing our CSS being shown at all? When I was like, oh, great, I love how the headings are. So I'm getting a little bit less sun in here, if that's all right. Oh, maybe a little more than that. These are actually the default ones. What is wrong with my HTML where I'm not seeing thank you very much, baking? Everybody's just like, Jess, you've done it again. You've done it again. And this is my favorite thing to forget when I'm just copying over some code. We've got our link, rel equals, and then our ref. Is it ref or something? It's ref, isn't it? Oh, heck. Yeah, styles.css. Thank you very much. All of y'all are just like, Jess, come on. You are too silly to forget how to do this. Okay, so we're seeing this again. So still, we've finally got, and thank you very much for your incredible patience. Ed is backstage being like, Jess, you didn't link that. Y'all are very patient. Here we've got the strong visual hierarchy. Our H1, still very powerful, even though we've overwritten the default. Our H2, a little bit less powerful. But down here, we've got the strong on our tip. And we've got this call-out box saying, do you know what? We did use strong to highlight that there's a tip here, and it's both semantically important and visually going to be called out a bit. But this call-out box down here gives us a ton of visual clues to say, hey, what's going on here is really, really important. Oh, this is a really nice philosophical question. Say, hey, do you know what? Mel's asking, is the white space used to give users time to digest info? For example, if the text is split up into paragraphs, the blank line is like a little break for your mind to store a summary. And like, it's less cognitively demanding than a wall of text. Gosh, this is a beautiful way to ask this question. I wonder if it's more about the space than the time. So if we see a ton of text clumped together and there's no white space, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So thinking about it as time to process or space to process, both seem like really delightful ways to think about this. Why isn't the text in the callout box wrapped in paragraph tags? It is standard practice. It is because edited all of the parts of this that are correct, and that was me. So yes, we should write the text in the callout box in paragraph tags. Thank you. And y'all are never ever going to hurt me by asking is that right? How do we like that? And you're right, it should be in a paragraph tag or a section tag. Hang on. We're going to come back here to our notes. And thank you very, very much for being like, Jess, your CSS is even linked. Why are you? Yeah. We could even add a call to action button to the stuff we want to pay attention to the most. Let's add that div. Doop. Sorry, doop is a very important technical concept. Let's add that example here and reload that. So this is something I think we mentioned once, which is some types of characters are reserved in HTML. And that means we can't really use them unless we, I'm grabbing the additional CSS from our notes, bring it over here into our styles and add it here. Do I have call out twice? Oh, I do have call out twice. I want to keep this one. So here we've got a different style of call out, which I really, really like personally. Just personally, the blue, good balance. I like the blue. And here we've got a call to action button that says, hey, this is what I want you to really pay attention to. Here's a big chunky button that draws your attention. I'm going to come back to our user-defined fundamentals, and I'm going to make a note to myself too. To fix that little comma to an escape character in our notes. And this is not super useful for y'all, but it might be useful process-wise to see, yeah, as I'm learning or as I'm teaching, I really, really like to add, here's what's going on here, here's what's going on here, here's what's going on here. So I'll often, during class, write my to-dos on the whiteboard so y'all can see them even if they're messy. And as I'm learning or as I'm teaching, I also have my paper notebook for my own notes. Hang on. So we've got our notes here. Okay. Oh gosh, very jazz hands. A little too excited. Thank you, team. How does scale work in design? And here, when we're talking about scale, very simply, what we're talking about is the size. I like to think about the scale of a map. So the scale of a map refers to how much space on a map corresponds to how much space in the real world. So it's the space, it's the size, and scaling is about the size that the elements have in relation to one another and how those will change with different screen sizes. If you have a map of Birmingham, and for those outside the UK, Birmingham is the best city in the UK. I used to live there, it's my favorite place in the UK. If you have a map of Birmingham, and it's a really big map, and let's say this map, 1 kilometer is 3 centimeters. That's the scale of your map, right? If you change this to say 10 kilometers equals 3 centimeters, the size of your map has changed, but the scale, how big the different things, how big the roundabouts, how big the streets, how big the buildings are relative to each other, the scale of the size of this map has changed, but the scale hasn't changed. It's just gotten more zoomed out. Oh, this is such a good question. So when we come to, let's come back here. When we come to our example of, don't wait. Why do we not see, in our code we have an apostrophe. Why don't we see that here? This is a really, really good question. This is because in HTML, some special types of characters are reserved. We can only use them when we're talking about our code. And we used to have to use a escape character. Let's grab this. We have to use an escape character if we want to use it in our text. So in CSS, we can use a backslash to escape characters. Let's grab those. Let me find that. We'll fix that right now. Escaping a character. Where is this? What's the best way to search for that? escaping a character. Thank you. Yes. So I want to escape this one, but hmm, what is, I know I had a resource for that. Just a backslash. Ulido's saying just a backslash should do this, and I think that only works in JavaScript, but I have been wrong many a day before. So let's see if I am excited enough to be wrong again. Alas, no. Hmm, where on earth is this? Do you know what? I'm going to go ahead and come back to this. So, oh yeah, yeah. So escape characters as a concept are characters that are reserved in HTML, CSS, or JavaScript because they're used to write the code. Here, we need to, where am I? Who am I? Go ahead and write, because we're doing the escape character for HTML, it's an and sign, APOS. And let's try this again. Ah, don't wait. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Let's go ahead and, can someone remind me? Two, let's, for folks who are in Discord, let's talk about, oh, heck, I will share this tab instead. Now that I have changed the HTML to include the escape character, APOS and the colon, we do see don't wait appropriately shown. Oh, Ulido gave me the right answer in a previous comment and I missed it. My effusive apologies. And you'll be able to look those up on the character reference glossary. My apologies. Sorry, trying to look at my notes and the chat is something that is challenging even on a good day. So scale. Scale is when we're talking about the element size relevant to other elements. And this is because just like a map could be rendered zoomed in or zoomed out, your users could be looking at your site on a teeny tiny page or a great big window on a great big monitor. So y'all are asking like good as heck questions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Using the correct scale is important for visual hierarchy. And I'm going to have y'all take a look at this code. Wow, very, very carefully, making sure you've linked to it. No, let's go ahead and leave this alone. So I'm going to ask you to explore this by yourself, making sure that it's linked to your CSS file. No, be better than me at this. But here we've got some code, and this code is going to do something that we haven't seen before. The big thing from this section is scale is just like a map. We're talking about the size of elements relative to each other. Big thing. Scale, the size of elements relative to each other, not measured against the size of the viewport, not measured against the size of the window your users are using, but relative to each other. And I see some really, really good questions. So immediately, me is just like, yes, yes, yes. I see this @ sign. What the heck is this @ sign? What does it do? Cool, 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 cool. I'm going to be mean the exact same way I was like, hey, good news. We're going to be looking at some things, and it's not going to make sense until we get to CSS. Here, we're previewing the concept of a media query. This @ sign that we're seeing in our code is a media query. A media query, we're going to get to it, I promise. Actually, it's way too bright in here. I'm so sorry, my loves. Let's have a dark and gloomy little time. A media query is going to give us the opportunity to set CSS rules that are different for users on different sized viewports. This means when you're setting your rules of style for your web page, you can say, hey, if my user is looking at my web page on a huge, huge screen, show them these rules. But if my user is looking at my website on a teeny tiny screen, give them something else. If it's okay, I'm going to use my website as an example. And the reason I'm using my website as an example is not because I'm too proud. It's because I borrowed this with permission. This looks really, really cool. And this looks really, really cool because someone else did the template. So somebody else, and it's linked to at the bottom, did the theme. Here, this is what my website looks like on a very big screen. But I'm conscious that maybe someone wants to come and look at my website from a teeny tiny screen. So, if somebody's looking at my website on a smaller viewport, I have different rules. I say, hey, instead, you can tell this hasn't been updated in ages. It still has Twitter on here. Twitter's not even a thing anymore. I've said this for a while, but my project for this week is to fix it. So on a great big screen, I've said, set the rules so users see my website tiled out like this. On a little tiny screen, please vertically stack these so users on a phone don't have too stressful of a time. You know what? It might be a little tiny bit inappropriate, but can I ask y'all too, when you see me next Monday, just be like, Jess, have you fixed your new website? Have you done it? Have you done it? Because some external guilt might be really useful. So media queries are going to give us the opportunity to say, hey, we've got users on different size viewports, and I want to give them different visual experiences. Scale can also be really helpful for interactivity. If your input elements are too small on mobile, people are going to have a heck of a difficult time using it. If you give me a form and the input element's like teeny tiny, I'm not going to fill out that form. How about alignment? Do you know what? I am the biggest language dork in the world. So y'all go ahead and please yell at me about what about languages might have me use different types of alignment. We can have different types of alignment for design. We can have it for different kinds of layout, different kinds of composition. But why would some types of languages require different types of alignment? So alignments is the way we align our text or our elements. We can have left alignment starting left to right. We can have center alignment where stuff starts out in the center and expands. We can have stuff that starts on the right and goes to the left for alignment. We can have justified alignment, which means it's going to stay where we put it. And we can have vertical alignment where stuff is going to go ahead and start at the top and go down. And you know what? I'm always worried that I'm being too familiar when I say, oh my loves, but I absolutely love getting to learn with all of y'all, and it is such a joy. So folks here are absolutely correct, saying, do you know what? Left alignment for a lot of different types of languages. We're doing this bootcamp in English. A lot of y'all might not use English as your primary language. And thank you for joining us in your second or third or fifth language. That's really stressful. But English, Spanish, French, Dutch, Turkish? Turkish is the same alignment, right? Oh, sorry. Y'all can't see Etta backstage. Etta speaks like 6 languages. It's unnecessary. She's looking very, very like, no, no, no. She's stunning at them. She's good at everything. It's disgusting. I'm jealous. But there are a lot of languages that are right to left aligned. And folks in the chat are rightly saying some examples of this would be Arabic, Hebrew, anything that uses a Perso-Arabic script, all start right and then left. So making sure that when we're building websites in these languages, we're getting our layout right and we're thinking about the composition is really important. Vertical alignment, so text start or another element starting at the top and running down, very, very correctly. We've got, where are we? Oh no, hang on. Folks are continuing to talk about languages in the chat really usefully, and I respectfully refuse to get nerd sniped and excited about this. So, Me Can't Spell really helpfully points out that you can write some Chinese languages and Japanese can optionally be written vertically, which is a really, really useful place to start. Thank you very much. You know what? Someday we'll have a separate social call where y'all will just get to yell at me about different languages. I'm excited all day. So, left alignment, we usually use it in text where each element is aligned to the left margin, right to left languages. These Dutch, Brazilian Portuguese, Swahili, yeah, right alignment. Usually used for elements that are aligned to the right margin for left to right languages. Stuff that's Perso-Arabic, stuff that's written with Hebrew orthography. We've got a bunch of them. And if you ask me to name all of them, I will get some wrong. Center alignment is when you want something oomph right in the middle of that page. Maybe a heading, maybe a logo. I can't think of any languages that would specifically require it, but it would work pretty well with both. Justified alignment. Justified alignment is when it's aligned to both the right and left. So like, look, I want you to stay, boom, exactly where I put you. And it's usually used for articles where you want it to feel really intentionally placed in your page. Yeah. Vertical alignment. Okay. I'm so sorry. One thing we're doing is we're previewing a lot of stuff where we're going to tell you about it in a second. And y'all have already hardened your hearts against this because we did this a lot when we were doing HTML. It's like, we'll get to CSS soon. We'll get to CSS soon. We've already told you we're going to learn about media queries together. Flex, we're going to learn about Flexbox together soon. Media queries are a way to give users on different sized viewports different rules of style. Flexbox and CSS Grid are two sort of mental models for laying out things in CSS, but they're mental models which can be rendered in CSS code. And I really, really love this, the idea that, hey, here is a way of thinking about breaking up your page, about thinking about your layout, but that's also a technical system. And Mel makes a really, really good point to say, hey, do you know what? If I'm working with text that's not from my language, or if I'm working with a different cultural paradigm, I worry a bit that I'm going to get this wrong. So if somebody asks me tomorrow, like, Jess, can you build this website for us? We're building this for users who primarily speak Arabic. I'm like, fantastic, wonderful. This might not be, I would recommend talking to a developer who has Arabic as their first language or primary language they use day to day, because there's going to be differences in the language. There's going to be differences in not just the culture, but in the sort of design sensibilities that I am probably not going to do the best job with, right? Mel, this is very, very adept and very, very on the nose to say, hey, do you know what? If somebody was giving me some work where, it's pretty targeted to a culture or a language that I don't really have a lot of experience with, often that might be a good time to pull in a collaborator from that language background or that culture, or to say, hey, I might even recommend going with someone else on this. Ba-ba-ba-bum. White space again. Stunning. I think this might help. So we had a question about this, and we just wanted to come down to it. White space is really important to create balance between the elements of your page. For example, the white space around your call to action button separates it from other elements and makes it sort of pop, makes it stand out. There are different types of white space: macro white space, active white space, passive white space, micro white space. Let's look at those. Macro white space. This is the big old bits of white space between larger elements, images, text blocks, buttons. So these are big elements, and they get a big chunk of white space to sort of make sure they really pop. Active white space is space that you, as a developer, has intentionally left blank, where you say, hey, I'm leaving this space empty because I think this white space is an important part of the composition, the sort of musical symphony of my page. Passive white space is like, look, there's some white space left on this page, but it wasn't really intentional. This white space that's left is because I ran out of content. Enjoy that white space. It's just a bonus. Micro white space is some people call it kerning, the art of balancing text. The micro white space is space between individual characters on a line of text. And that's to make sure stuff is readable or that stuff isn't stretched out too much. And Mel makes such a good point to say, do you know what? If somebody has designed a page for a viewport that's really, really big, if I design my website for folks on a giant monitor and I then try and look at that on a phone, all of that white space that looks beautiful, that really, really meaningful composition is really going to piss me off on a phone. All of that white space on a phone means I'm going to have to zoom and zoom and zoom for things to be readable at all. And Learner asked this really, really helpfully to say, hey, why are we categorizing this white space at all? So why are we thinking about white space as macro or active or passive? So we've got these different types of terminology to help cover why we're using those. So having the individual language for these is really, really useful when we're talking about why this white space is on a page, especially if you're in a meeting. So if Ed is my boss, which would be right and just in any ordered universe, if I built this website right here, and Eda as my boss comes in and says, yes, what's with all of this white space on the other side of this list? That's a ton of white space. Is this active white space? Is this intentional? Or is this passive white space, that this is just white space because because the elements don't fold these up? So these different types of languages, this different type of language to differentiate these, gives us the technical language to talk about why this has happened, why we're using this, and the intentionality behind it. This is sort of the tricks of the trade in giving us the language to describe this. Is that okay? Does that help? In design, there's a law of proximity. And I think this is really beautiful. And the law of proximity says the elements that are close together, you're presenting them to your user with the context that they have a shared context. If on my page, I present you with a picture of a puppy and a picture of some shampoo, I'm hopefully trying to communicate to you something about giving a puppy a bath. When your users see elements grouped together, they're going to think, or they're being invited to think, hopefully, about these elements together in concert. When elements are placed far from each other, they're both perceived as being unrelated to each other, and hopefully that's intentionally communicated. Yeah. So by putting stuff right by each other, we can communicate, hey, these are friends. There's something going on between them. Yeah, gosh, I see a really good question about CSS video, and I'm going to come back to it later. Oh, this is so poetic. Now saying, hey, having these different technical terms to talk about white space or to talk about design terms in com, could this be a bit about how the English describe rain? Because England rains a lot, and it doesn't this week for folks who are here, but it generally does. Um, Being able to say, oh, it's a shower, or it's a fleeting rain, or it's a quick drenching rain, having a bunch of different permutations, having a bunch of different ways to describe rain is useful in a place where we often have to describe rain. Here, having very specific terms for white space is useful in the exact same way. It's valuable because we're going to have white space to talk about. Thank you. That is incredibly poetic of a way to it. So, what are the best practices with working with your images and designs? And so be cool, be cool. We're definitely going to cover this. So, just as a spoiler, this word right here, responsive, responsive, responsive. So, when we're thinking about images on our website, here are the things that we can consider. We're going to use responsive images that scale. And remember, we talked about scale before. That is the size of elements relative to each other. That means they stay the same size relative to each other, even as the viewport changes size. So responsiveness is when things scale to fit the size of the screen. I'm going to chuck that into the chat. Okay, so we're going to come back to the same way we talk about accessibility all the time, and the same way we talk about semantic HTML all the time. We're going to talk about responsiveness all the time. This is one of the ones to like sort of etch into your heart. Where you can, use higher resolution images that are optimized for the web. Higher resolution images have more pixels per inch and better image quality. I believe I was going to say the young people will talk about getting caught out in 4K, and I'm conscious that at my big age, I am always way, way behind. This is something that young folks would have said maybe 5 years ago, huh? So different resolutions. So televisions have different resolutions, monitors have different resolutions. Here we have different resolutions of images as well. Make sure that your images are the right size. Think about the balance between your text and images. Make sure that those images are placed alongside the important context. Make sure we try and follow that law of proximity in with our images. And just like I told you, again and again and again, y'all are going to have to hear me talk about semantic HTML. You will never hear me shut up about accessibility. Accessibility here, don't forget that whenever we have an image, unless it is a purely decorative image, we want to provide alt text for it. Yeah. We're going to come down a little bit. What is progressive enhancement? Progressive enhancement is a big bucket concept. We're going to talk about it briefly, but we're going to come back to it. I'm going to give you a cheat here. Progressive enhancement is sort of, the practice, the art. Progressive enhancement is the practice or the art of making sure that your users still get the information they need, even when things don't work. Yeah. And that seems really, really conceptually difficult. But let's look at those. Here, the focus is on providing a core experience for everyone. Oh, you little stop. Sorry, when I say stop, I mean don't stop. This is a significantly better way to say this than I just have. Whenever any one of y'all wants to give me a better way to say something, I will carve it into my heart. And this is perfect. Yulido said and said, progressive enhancement is backwards graceful degradation. So this is saying, hey, how do we make sure that all of our users have access to the core of what's important on our pages, even when additional features don't work? Backwards graceful degradation. That is so poetic. I love it. Thank you. So here, in order to have an experience where you make sure all of your users are able to access the core of what's most important, you need to first define to yourself what is the most important. We talked earlier about how most web shops these days kind of look alike and kind of feel alike. But if I'm thinking about building a shop on the web, what are the most important things? What's the core experience I need to make sure everyone can access? And this is a question that I'm going to leave for y'all. So the example here is, what kinds of things or features would be part of a core experience on a web shop? And this is absolutely not rhetorical. Let me know. Nicely yell at me about what kinds of features. So if I'm building a website, what do I need to make sure is available for everyone? And Mel is like, hey, is this something, is progressive enhancement something we need to experiment with and make mistakes? Everything is going to be something we need to experiment with and make mistakes to figure out. You are very, very right. And a really good way to do this is to break things in our own connection to see. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love this. So here, we need to make sure all of the core content and basic functionality should be accessible on all browsers. People use all kinds of different kinds of browsers. And even when somebody says, this browser isn't being updated anymore, it's not secure anymore, don't use it, people still use it. Testing on different browsers is really important. You'll see cross-browser testing. Make sure it fails gracefully. Make sure that all the advanced layouts are provided on external CSS style sheets. So we learned about the different ways to write your CSS using the inline CSS, writing it in the header of your CSS. But here it's saying, look, in order for you to use really good progressive enhancement, put all of your advanced layouts, make sure that those are on an external website. We are not going to do JavaScript in this bootcamp, but if we were writing JavaScript, do you know what? I'd want you to write that in a separate file, the same way we write our CSS. And this is super duper important. When a user sets a preference in their browser, you got to respect that, both because it's a cool thing to do, but also it would be real gross to try and override that. This is such an important point. I've never heard this from one of you, but working on big, fancy projects, I've heard again and again, we don't need to test this for this whole browser. We don't need to test this for slower connections. People just need to upgrade. People just need to use better devices. That's a great way for, if you're in a rich country, if you're someplace comfortable, saying, oh no, everyone just needs to get a new phone, or everyone just needs to make sure they're on a fast enough internet connection. That is not the most practical and not the most realistic look at the way the world works. When people use old software, when people use old hardware, often it's because this is what they have access to. You do get some outliers like myself who my phone is a very, very graceful elderly lady, and I'm going to use this phone until it dies around me. We've got folks again and again saying, hey, how do we make this work? This is so, oh, I love this. I love this. Thank you so much. And get us to saying, hey, this is like the core of UX, especially if we're moving from sort of analog thinking to digital thinking. Sometimes we try and add a lot. We make things too flashy, too big, and we don't actually need to. Oh gosh, I should say that even though I will continue to use devices way past the end of life, y'all should, if you can, always make sure that you are keeping your devices, your operating systems, make sure you're keeping them up to date for security's sake. I am keeping my operating systems of choice up to date, I promise. So, a big thing is making sure that if there's really important content, make sure that's available just in HTML. So, a good way to test this is to turn off your JavaScript and look at your own site. We're not learning about JavaScript in this bootcamp, so it's a really, really good way for us to get the core fundamentals down of we want to make sure these websites we're building work without JavaScript. There is a JavaScript course that immediately follows this one, and y'all might want to check that one out next. We've got a couple of really, really good questions, and let's look at those. Wow, I'm so sorry, we're going to take a deep breath and come all the way to the top. So anybody else has any questions, please fuss at me. And we will also look at the terrifying amount of reading for this session. I know it's way too much. We chunked all of these theories together because we wanted to go pretty quickly through them, because we just wanted a really, really quick touch over these design concepts so we can try and come back to them as we get back hands-on with CSS. So Brian was saying they think they saw a CSS video on a different channel saying you can use text line start and text line end instead of using text line left and right and calling them logical properties. Which one's best? Oh gosh, would start and end, let me check on this. Oh, heck. I'm just checking. So, yeah, text line start and end versus text align right or left. I'm grabbing the text line here. Sorry, y'all hear me tapping. Yeah. So these logical properties might be a really, really good way to do these. Here we've got, let's share this tab. The text line sets the horizontal alignment of inline. It means a lot like works with vertical line, but in the horizontal direction. Yeah. Here we've got start, end, left, right, center, justify, and match the parent. Can y'all guess what match parent is? You can see folks decide to use different approaches to this. I think setting text lines start and end means that it's quite a bit more flexible for users with different types of text alignment in that they're using. I think the start and end is a bit more modern, a way to approach this, but text line right and text line left and text line start and text line end will often get you the same visual layout. I quite like start and end, yeah, just as sort of a personal approach, if that's okay. And Mel's asking us to preview a little bit and saying, hey, this is such a good question. Heck, this is a reasonably complex programming concept that if y'all go on to do JavaScript or Python or other stuff, um, if else or if statements are a pretty basic concept of different types of programming languages. And if y'all can remind me when we start studying media queries to talk about media queries in the context of if statements, this is a really good way to do it. So, an if statement, I could say, I'm going to add a non-programming. Oh, you know what? That's not very helpful because it's going to be backwards. Let's do it in the chat. So I could say, if my cat is screaming, give him a treat. That's going to teach the worst habits in the world, isn't it? But here I'm saying, if this condition is true, do this action. Yeah. And media queries are really, really similar to this. This is saying, if my user's viewport is smaller than 600 pixels wide, give them these style rules. So the same way I could say, if my cat is screaming, please give him a treat. Here, with media queries, you can say, if my user is on a screen smaller than 600 pixels wide, use these style rules. So I think the if makes a lot of sense here. And we've got Sunny saying, hey, all the free code camp lessons have a bin icon when you hover over them. Whoa. Do you know what? This sounds terrifying. I love, love, love when stuff goes wrong. So what's this bin icon do? Nice. Okay. So Sunny was saying, hey, I've noticed that next to each of the free code camp things, I see a bin icon. What does it do? Sunny was like, I don't want to click on it in case something goes wrong. So the bin icon, for anybody wondering, will delete your progress on just this section. Your progress through any step and challenge in this section will be completely gone. And in order to do it, you have to type, I agree to reset my progress. And so it won't wipe everything, but it will wipe just that section. So if you get really, really lost on a project, that could be a really, really good way to do it. Stunning. Thank you very much for this very good question. Let us come way, way over here and talk about what I would love to see from solo work before the next class. This is so much reading. You're going to have to listen to so much talking tomorrow, but then we'll get back to fun things soon. Please read about user-centered design. I'm going to be so excited to talk about user-centered design. What are user requirements? What are user research? What's user testing? I'm going to be excited about these too. Oh, y'all just have to listen to me be excited. What are best practices for designing a dark mode feature? What are breadcrumbs? What are best practices for these? What are cards? What are best practices for these? What are infinite scrolls? Ooh. Oh gosh, I bet y'all know a different word for infinite scrolls. What do you often hear a different term for if you're on social media and you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling? What do you call that scrolling, especially when it gives you a horrifying little tummy ache or a horrifying pit in your heart? Infinite scrolling can also be called this other scrolling when it is not sparking joy. What are best practices for design? What's a modal? Oh, that's okay. This will tell us what modals are. Everything's fine. And how would we design them once we know what they are? What are good ways to design showing people progress on forms, on registration, on set? We're going to cover that. Oh, y'all way up at the top of this session, we're saying, what about how shopping carts all look alike? Let's talk about Best practices for designing shopping carts these days. Oh no, what is progressive disclosure? It's okay, it's okay. We'll talk about it tomorrow. What's deferred and what's lazy registration? This sounds so complicated. It's okay, it's okay. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Hey, do you know what? Since we're doing too much, way too much, let's often talk about what is a design brief? What are some common tools that are used by designers? And then we're going to review all of that, which is too much. And I'm going to ask y'all to take a solo quiz. Yep. So I asked, hey, 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 what's another way to say infinite scroll? And all of y'all are like, doom scrolling, doom scrolling, doom scrolling. How about I'm going to go ahead and leave you to do way too much reading and hopefully no doom scrolling in your day. Thank you very, very much for letting us race through these design fundamentals. It's just that I wanted to cover them very, very quickly, and we'll cover them very, very quickly tomorrow. It's a ton of stuff. And then we're going to start coming right back into CSS so we can start learning some more of the syntax, learning some more of the processes with these in mind. So be able to say, hey, we're doing forms in CSS. Oh, we sort of previewed this a little bit. Stunning. You are stuck with me again tomorrow, and that is the best possible outcome for me. Please have the easiest possible. If it's morning, I'm going to lovingly suggest that you have a good day all day, or as easy a day as you can. If it is afternoon where you are, it's time to take a little tiny stretch and get through the rest of the day as chill as you can. And if it's very late at night, if it's not me being a bully, I will lovingly, lightly suggest you get some sleep. I'll let all of you go, and thank you again.